The alien woman wept in my arms. You left me as a child. The docking clamps on Elias's shuttle squealed like they were trying to warn him, not about the atmospheric conditions which were dry but livable, not about the failing magnetic stabilizers of landing platform 9. No, they seemed to whine with an old greased-in complaint, "You shouldn't have come back." The airlock hissed open, spilling the smell of oxidized metal and heat-warped sand into the cabin. Alaris hadn't changed much in 15 years. It still looked like someone had tried to terraform a junkyard and then gave up halfway through. Off in the distance, the horizon shimmered with false promises, while closer the scavenger town of Hovarth clung to the rock like a stubborn barnacle. Elias stepped out, boots crunching on powdered grit. His helmet visor retracted with a soft click. Instantly, his sinuses protested the dry bite of the wind. A boy, no older than 10, stared at him from behind a repurposed drone chassis, holding what looked suspiciously like a disassembled railgun. "Who are you supposed to be?" the boy asked, wrinkling his nose. "Delivery guy," Elias replied, patting the cargo module slung over his shoulder. "I bring hope, spare parts, and freeze-dried lasagna." The kid frowned, unimpressed. "Nobody wants you freeze-dried lasagna. That's what everyone says until they run out of edible lichen." The boy narrowed his eyes, then made an exaggerated hand gesture that in most species was probably not a welcome. Elias grinned and walked on. He hadn't come back for the view or the lasagna. The contract had been vague. Retrieve a sealed research crate. Last known location. Have settlement. Moon 3. Triple pay if delivered intact. He didn't like the phrasing. Sealed crates rarely contained anything pleasant. Most times it was unstable isotopes or someone's head in a cryobox. The alleys of the settlement felt narrower than he remembered. Rusted plasteel had turned colors even rust shouldn't. Solar tarps fluttered overhead like defeated flags. Kids darted through the shadows, their laughter brittle. Someone had scrolled a mural across a curved wall, an enormous bird with circuit wings. Beneath it, a single word, remember. He reached the central plaza, or what passed for one. A cracked platform ringed by solar wells and dried water tanks. A few elders sat around a glowing cooking unit, their silver robes gathering dust. They looked up as he approached, but none said a word. And then she was there. Not appearing exactly. She emerged slowly from a narrow corridor between two buildings, as if the moon itself had exhaled her from its memory. Her stride was silent, her presence somehow louder than the desert wind. She wore a cloak of thin fiber weave, bleached by sun and weather, wrapped around her like a whisper. Her hair was longer now, deep brown streaked with ash grey, tied with braided cord. But it was her ears, long, elven, unmistakably alien, that gave him pause. His feet didn't move. His brain caught up a second too late. She didn't speak at first. She only stared, expression unreadable. And then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. There was nothing romantic or even gentle about it. It was the way a drowning person might cling to driftwood. She buried her face against his shoulder. Her breath hitched once, twice, and then the tears came. "When you left me last, I was a child, human." Her voice had not stayed the same. It had deepened, taken on texture. But there was still that lilt at the edge of every word, like music half-remembered. Elias stood frozen, unsure what to do with his arms. He finally raised one awkwardly and patted her back as if she were a crying engine panel. "Hey, wow, Kais." She pulled back just enough for him to see her face. The tears tracked clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. She nodded once. Her eyes, still that strange shifting green, looked into him like she was scanning for fractures. "You remember me?" she asked, voice lower now, quieter. "Yeah," he said, then cleared his throat. "Yeah, of course I do. You were always asking questions about chocolate and spaceships and how Earth toilets work." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I still don't believe your version of toilets. They really do flush in a swirl." It's majestic. She sniffed, then actually did smile. It was like a sunbeam through old glass, faint but warm. You disappeared, she said softly. Yeah. He looked down. I did. He didn't explain why. Not yet. She stepped back and gestured for him to follow. Come, we should talk somewhere less watched. He turned to glance behind him. 3 elders were pretending not to listen by staring intensely at a malfunctioning kettle. Led the way, he said. They walked in silence through winding paths cut between stacked habitats and jerry-rigged wind turbines. At one point, a small, dog-like robot tried to sniff his boots. Kai's whistled sharply, and it backed off with a whine. Still training the robo-pets, I see. That one's named Regret. Ah, cheery. They reached a low building, half buried in rock. Inside, it was cooler, lit by thin strands of bioluminescent algae woven into the ceiling. A child's drawing, crude stick figures with huge ears and stars overhead, was taped to the far wall. Kai's offered him a seat on an old cargo crate. He took it. She sat across from him, her hands folded. You left, she said again, but you didn't forget. No, I didn't. Then why? Elias opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed the back of his neck like he was searching for the right excuse in the folds of skin. Earth politics, honey, he said. Funding cuts, orders. I was a junior assistant, Kais. I didn't get a choice. You got a shuttle, he winced, and a uniform. It had holes in it, and you got to leave. Silence. She didn't press further. She just sat there, watching him like she wanted to know whether the guilt was real. So, Elias said, trying to pivot, is that robot dog still glitching out with love declarations, or did you finally reprogram him? Still does. I find it comforting. Do you? No. A beat passed. I missed you, she said. He blinked. Even after I left? Especially after. The words hung in the air between them like old satellites, still in orbit, still capable of crashing down at any moment. And outside, the wind picked up again as if Alaris itself had been listening. Elias hadn't expected to sleep well, but he hadn't expected to be woken by something chewing his sock. The first thing he saw when he cracked open one blurry eye was a pair of glowing red orbs staring at him about 6 inches from his foot. The second thing he noticed was the metallic jaw clamped lovingly around his ankle. Regret, Kais called from somewhere in the next room. Stop eating the human. The robot dog backed away with a worrying snort that somehow managed to sound both mechanical and offended. Elias sat up slowly, still dressed in his flight gear, and rubbed his eyes. Morning already? It's mid-shift, she replied. We don't really have mornings here. The sun loops are artificial. I see. Then good temporal anomaly to you. He stretched, groaned as something in his back popped, and shuffled out of the room. The small home Kais had led him to the night before had clearly once been part of a science station. Ancient wall terminals blinked blue in sporadic patterns, and a broken ceiling panel revealed fiber optics dangling like synthetic vines. There was a faint, familiar scent of heated mineral dust and recycled air. Moon musk, he used to call it. Kais was sitting at a makeshift table, poking at something in a bowl that resembled green oatmeal with ambition. Breakfast, she offered. Is it sentient? Only emotionally. He took the bowl. The contents jiggled slightly. He didn't ask what it was. They ate in silence for a moment, spoons scraping softly. Elias tried not to make a face. Kais caught it anyway. You still hate thorn root. I thought it might have evolved into something less chewy. It hasn't, but now we ferment it, gives it character, like a wine, like an old shoe. He chuckled despite himself. She smiled again, and this time it lingered longer. After the meal, she gestured for him to follow. They stepped out into the warming streets of Hovarth. A few children ran past, barefoot and shrieking joyfully, trailing long ribbons of photoplastic. Behind them, A drone hovered overhead, sputtering out static-laced instructions in 3 dialects, none of which anyone obeyed. Kais led him toward the outer ridge, past storage domes and collapsed biodomes overtaken by rust lichen. They climbed a narrow stone path, and Elias recognized the terrain, an old observation post from the initial Earth survey mission. The platform's sensor dish still stood, though bent like a tired flower. There, beneath the shadow of the dish, lay a shape covered in sand and time. Kais knelt, brushed the dust away with reverent hands, and revealed a metallic arc roughly the size of a small escape pod. Symbols shimmered faintly on its surface, alien, yet not unfamiliar. Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. "Is that the memory machine? Or what's left of it?" she said. He crouched beside her, running his fingers along the smooth outer casing. The texture was cold, but there was a subtle hum underneath, like a power source dormant but still dreaming. "I thought this was a myth," he murmured. "You saw it when you were here last. I saw a lot of things. I thought most of them were hallucinations from drinking unfiltered moonshine." Kais ignored that. She pressed her palm against the arc, and the surface shimmered, revealing a faint interface. Lines of light curved and reformed, adjusting to her touch. "It was built by those who came before us," she said. "Not my people, not yours. Something older. It preserves thought, emotion, memory. We used to think it was a relic for the dead, and now we think it was a library, one that records minds." Elias leaned back on his heels. "And you brought me here because?" "I want you to remember. I do. Remember. Not like this." She pressed a few points on the interface, and the air shimmered between them. A soft hum rose, then grew. Elias felt something shift behind his eyes, like his thoughts had suddenly grown too loud. He blinked, the world rippled, and he was no longer on Eleris. He was standing in a corridor he hadn't seen in over a decade. Clean walls, Earth-standard lights, the smell of sterilized air. A young girl darted past him barefoot, laughing, clutching a worn-out book about star whales. She turned, ears poking through tangled hair, and grinned. "Human," she called. "I learned 20 Earth words today. One of them is hamburger. What does it mean?" "Kais." Elias watched as his younger self, a bit thinner, slightly less jaded, bent down to explain the concept of ground beef and buns to a girl who had never tasted anything that wasn't grown in a nutrient slurry. The vision shifted. Again. He saw her crying when he left, standing at the edge of the landing pad, holding a drawing of a rocket ship and 2 stick figures, one with long ears, one without. Then everything dissolved. He staggered back, breath ragged, head pounding. Kais was still there, kneeling by the machine. "You locked that away," she said quietly. "You weren't supposed to forget it." "I didn't mean to," he muttered. "You left, and we stayed. We remembered everything." He sat on a nearby rock trying to focus. His pulse was thudding behind his eyes. "We're not just a story you left behind, Elias." "I never thought you were." "Yes, you did, or it was easier to pretend." He looked at her, really looked. She was older, stronger, a survivor of something he couldn't name. And still, behind all that, the girl who asked about hamburgers. A gust of wind blew across the ridge, bringing with it the sound of laughter from the village below. Elias rubbed his temples. "So what now? You want me to fix this thing?" She raised an eyebrow. "You know how to fix alien memory tech?" "I did a YouTube tutorial once on how to reset a coffee maker. I figure it's transferable." She chuckled despite herself. "Come on," she said. "Let me show you the rest of the damage we've inherited." As they walked back, regret bounded up beside them and began barking loudly in a poor imitation of English. "I love you, Kais," it shouted in a garbled monotone. "You are the best. Do not fear entropy," Case sighed. "Still can't reprogram that line." Elias nodded solemnly. Honestly, I think that one's kind of deep. Elias was trying very hard not to scream, which is generally a noble goal when you're chest deep in sand with only your legs sticking out of an ancient ventilation shaft. Do you need assistance? Kais asked, her voice faintly amused and only slightly muffled by the sand. No, he said, spitting out grit. I just enjoy eating 3 square meals of disappointment and dirt. Above him, a shaft of daylight streamed in through a broken dome. Kais crouched over the opening, her long ears flicking at the light breeze, holding what looked suspiciously like a retractable grappling tether and not using it. You're the one who said, and I quote, "I've got this." I was talking about life in general, not this specific situation. Ah. She uncoiled the tether finally, and with only a minor amount of additional humiliation, pulled him free from the collapsed access tunnel. He flopped onto the sun-baked ground like a disgruntled fish, panting. Why do these things always lead to underground labs and not, say, hot springs? He muttered. Because you attract trouble. No, I attract legacy systems with poor maintenance. There's a difference. She handed him a canteen. The water was tepid and slightly metallic, but it was wet and not sand, so he drank it gratefully. They were exploring what remained of Facility 7, one of the old research posts from the original Earth Coalition, back when Eleris had still been an intercultural cooperative endeavor and not a graveyard of half-finished intentions. The facility sprawled beneath the surface like a half-forgotten memory. Collapsed corridors and sealed hatches interrupted their progress, but the interior was surprisingly intact, at least the parts that hadn't been reclaimed by nature or eccentric settlers with a passion for laser graffiti. They pushed deeper into the structure, illuminating their path with wrist-mounted lamps. The walls shimmered with thin lines of copper mold, a symbiotic organism Kais called light rot that glowed faintly when agitated. Elias was still trying to decide if it was beautiful or mildly threatening. So what exactly are we looking for? He asked, stepping carefully over a collapsed support beam that resembled a robot spine. There was a lab down here, something my people call the Echo Room. It's where your researchers were studying the effects of memory transcription through resonance fields. Catchy name. Better than Mind Blender 9000, he chuckled. Okay, fair. They came to a sealed door. Kais examined the control panel, then pulled out a small cylinder from her satchel and slid it into the interface. The panel hissed softly, blinking green, and the door split open with a reluctant groan. Inside, the air was heavier, stale, with years of undisturbed pressure. Banks of equipment lined the room, all silent. A central chair, surrounded by a halo of emitter pylons, stood at the heart of the chamber like a throne designed by a sadistic dentist. Kais walked over to the nearest console and brushed her fingers across the surface. A flicker of light sputtered. To life, lines of data appearing in a language Elias couldn't read. Your people built this? He asked. No, but they tried to understand it. Poorly. He wandered over to a dusty monitor and tapped it. I'm getting flashbacks to a science fair project that ended with an exploding grapefruit. This is worse. They didn't understand what the Echo Room actually did. They thought it was a cognitive imprint recorder, but it was more than that. It didn't just store thoughts, it could alter them. Elias blinked. Wait, are you saying this? Think and rewrite memories? Yes. Whose idea was that? That's like giving a toddler a plasma torch and hoping for interpretive sculpture. Kais gave a humorless smile. Yours. He stared. I beg your pardon? Your Earth Coalition. They initiated the tests. They were hoping to treat trauma by excising the memory patterns, but it didn't work the way they thought. The machine didn't just erase, it recontextualized, changed perception. Sometimes people forgot the truth altogether. Okay, he said, stepping back from the chair. Definitely not sitting in that. I wouldn't ask you to, but I need you to help me activate it. Elias scratched his chin. You want to turn on the mind-altering memory blender and not use it? You're going to need to walk me through the logic on that one. There's a memory in there, she said. One I need to see. I think it's connected to what happened when your people left, and to the artifact we found. He frowned. You think the memory machine and this echo room are connected? I know they are. The resonance patterns match, and the last log entry on that artifact mentioned Facility 7. Elias ran a hand through his hair. So what's the plan? We turn it on, it shows you the memory like a movie, and then we go home and hope we haven't accidentally swapped brains. Roughly, he sighed. Fine, but if I start speaking in rhyming couplets or forget how to make coffee, I'm blaming you. That's fair. They worked together in tense silence. Kais operated the alien interface with surprising ease, fingers flying. Across virtual nodes, while Elias rerouted auxiliary power from the backup generator they'd reactivated earlier. A low hum filled the chamber. The pylons around the chair pulsed with soft violet light. Kais took a deep breath and stepped into the circle. Wait, Elias said. You're going in there alone. I can handle it. You've got a track record of handling things that is both impressive and mildly terrifying. She smiled. Then this should be no different. She closed her eyes. The machine flared. Elias watched helplessly as a shimmer wrapped around her like heat off metal. Her body remained still, but something shifted in her expression. Confusion, wonder, pain. Then she spoke. They were going to take me. Elias stiffened. What? I see them. Men in suits, not Earth Coalition, private. They wanted to extract the data, said I was the ideal prototype. Kais, she swayed slightly. They were going to wipe me, turn me into a mirror of someone else. But he stopped them. Who? You did. Elias stared at her. What? You refused. You threatened to leak the files. You told them I wasn't some experiment. You said I was a child, a person, not theirs. The light began to fade. Kais collapsed into the chair, gasping. Elias rushed to her, catching her before she slid off the edge. I didn't remember that, he whispered. She looked up at him, eyes glassy. They made you forget, but now we know. He held her for a moment as the machine behind them powered down, and in the silence that followed, a small screen on the console blinked once, showing a new line of text. Memory link confirmed. Subject integrity stable. Welcome back, Elias. Elias was halfway through reprogramming a defunct cleaning drone to make coffee when the wall terminal exploded. Not in a dramatic, fireball-eating-the-ceiling way, more like a polite electrical sneeze. Sparks danced across the floor in an apologetic fizzle, and the lights dimmed as if the room itself were tired of being involved. That's the third one this week, Kais muttered, brushing soot off her sleeve. You have a gift. It's not a gift, Elias said, jabbing the ruined terminal with the butt of a hydrospanner. It's a curse. If I so much as look at old tech sideways, it gives up on life. Or maybe it recognizes you. I'm not sure if that's comforting or insulting. She smirked and handed him a cloth. They were back in Kais's makeshift workshop, which was technically the remnants of an old atmospheric calibration bay. Now it was cluttered with broken devices, glowing canisters, stacked memory cores, and one particularly smug robot dog chewing a chair leg. Regret barked once, then continued gnawing. Elias sat back against the wall, staring at the deactivated panel. So let me get this straight. I was part of a top-secret operation that tried to turn you into a memory-based prototype weapon. Yes. And then I somehow stopped them. You threatened to dump their secrets into the interstellar news nets. You also compared one of the directors to a boiled radish. He frowned. Did it work? Surprisingly well. You had a very sincere, angry face back then. I still do. You look like a confused librarian when you're angry. I'm choosing to be offended by that. She tapped the edge of the coffee synth module he'd been repurposing. But you don't remember doing it. Only fragments, dreams, flashes. That machine in the echo room brought back the moment I confronted them. But it's like watching someone else do it, a version of me I left behind. Kais was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You did leave him behind. You left me behind." Elias didn't respond. He adjusted the wiring on the synth unit instead, trying not to look at her. Outside, the artificial sun loops cycled into evening. The sky turned an indigo shade painted by algorithms, and distant domes cast long shadows across the ridge. Eventually, Kais broke the silence. "We received a signal last night, from orbit." Elias's head snapped up. "From who?" "Not who. What?" "It was a ping from a dormant satellite, Earth Coalition designation, but modified. The signal wasn't just a beacon, it was a code handshake, someone trying to connect to local systems, more like someone trying to wake something up." He stood, crossing to the wall display she was already pulling up. A map of Elaris appeared, overlaid with sensor data and pulsing energy points. "Sector V9, she said, pointing to the deep rift canyon. "There's a buried relay station there, one of the old off-grid black sites, supposedly shut down after the war. And you think whoever sent that signal wants to reactivate it, or recover what's buried in it?" Elias studied the map. "That's 60 kilometers from here. We can make it. In the crawler." He stared at the blinking dot, already dreading the trip. "What are the odds this ends with more memory-warping alien tech trying to scramble my insides like an egg?" "Roughly 87%, he sighed. "I'll pack snacks." The crawler, affectionately named Rusty Lament, had been salvaged from 3 different transports and somehow still retained a working navigation system that occasionally offered directions in Icelandic. It also creaked like a haunted wardrobe. Kais piloted, while Elias sorted through a crate of supplies in the back, discovering, among other things, a tattered comic book, 6 bars of emergency nutrient gum, and a cube labeled "Clothing, Casual, Extreme Cold, Court-Martial." "You ever been to V9? He asked, poking his head up. "Once, I was 13. A scavenger gang tried to trade me for batteries." "Charming. I took their hoverbike instead," he laughed. "Remind me not to cross you." "I have a list of reminders. Just like that?" They drove through Night Cycle, the terrain around them shifting from sand dunes to cragged stone fields that glowed faintly under the crawler's lights. Towering crystal formations jutted from the earth in sharp spirals, humming with low-frequency resonance. Elias reached out a hand as they passed one and felt his fingertips tingle. "Elaris has always been like this?" he asked. "It wasn't always. Awake. But something changed. Maybe your people woke it, or maybe we were just too young to hear it before." They arrived at the canyon edge by dawn cycle. The light bled gold across the cliffs, revealing a chasm that stretched down into shadows. Elias stepped to the edge, peering into the depths. "I hate climbing," he muttered. "We're not climbing." "Oh, wait, what do you mean we're not climbing?" She activated a small drone from her pack, which hovered upward, pulsed once, and fired. A zip-line launcher into the rock wall across the canyon. "Of course," he said. "Rocket rope. Because stairs are for people who don't live dangerously." They descended in harnesses, the wind howling around them. The station's outer wall appeared partway down, partially buried in the rock, camouflaged by time and erosion. A large metal hatch stood sealed at the base, its surface covered in alien vines that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. Kais stepped forward and placed her hand on the panel. The vines receded instantly. Elias blinked. "That's not creepy at all." "They remember me. That somehow makes it worse." The hatch opened with a hiss. Inside, the station was cold and utterly silent. Lights flickered on in sequence as they entered, revealing long corridors, dust-choked terminals, and containment doors sealed with Earth Coalition emblems. It was like walking into a fossilized nerve center. Kais led them down a hall to a reinforced chamber. Its door was half shattered. Inside, a crystalline device hovered above the floor, suspended by magnetic fields. It pulsed with a steady rhythm, like a sleeping heartbeat. "This is what they came for," Kai said. "A data crystal, one of the last." Elias approached it cautiously. "What's inside?" "Memories, entire lifetimes. Not just yours, not just mine. The original architects of this place, they put themselves into these. This is why the Coalition came. Not to help, to harvest." He stared at the crystal. "And now someone wants to start that up again?" Kais nodded. "And we're going to stop them." There was a long pause. "So," Elias said slowly, "how much trouble are we in exactly?" She met his eyes. "Galactic scale." The data crystal did not hum so much as it remembered in frequency. Elias could feel the pulse of it in his molars, a faint static tickle that made his fillings itch and his instincts consider fleeing just on general principle. Kais was far too comfortable being 2 feet from something that could store 1,000 years of someone else's mistakes. "This is not a flash drive," Elias muttered, carefully scanning the floating crystal with his handheld. "This is a bottled god with boundary issues." "It's inert right now," she said, crouching beside a console that might have once been part of a research relay, but now resembled a toaster mid-divorce. "But if someone transmits the right activation sequence, it could boot into a reconstruction mode." "That sounds made up." "I wish it were. It basically builds a mental map of all stored patterns and attempts to recreate their consciousness in virtual space, or real space, depending on available mass and energy." Elias turned to stare at her. "You're saying this thing could rebuild someone?" "Yes, given the right catalyst." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Okay, but if someone accidentally brings back a 17-eyed cosmic philosopher with a grudge against time, I'm leaving. I've already used up my weekly quota of existential dread." She didn't respond. Her fingers hovered over the console's dusty interface. "We can't move the crystal. It's anchored to this location." "Convenient. It's drawing power from deep geothermal nodes. The infrastructure here was built to house it permanently. Moving it would destabilize the core matrix." Translation: touch. "It wrong, and we all go up in a spectacular display of narrative irony." "Yes." Elias backed up a respectful few steps. Kais connected her wristband to the console. Code scrolled, alien script shifting between languages like a mind with multiple accents. She watched it silently for several seconds, then tapped one. A final sequence, a projection bloomed in the center of the room. A holographic sphere filled with hundreds, no, thousands of faces. Each flickered like candlelight, looping fragments of movement and sound. People laughing, arguing, reaching. "Out these are the stored minds?" Elias asked. "Echoes, ghosts maybe. Some are full consciousnesses, others are just memory clusters, thought snapshots." One of the images stabilized. A young girl with long ears and wide, frightened eyes. Elias took a slow step forward. "That's you," he whispered. Kais didn't answer. She was staring at the projection, face unreadable. "I remember her," he said. "I mean, not clearly, but there was one day where I sat with you in the gardens behind the dome. You had a toy made of copper wire and magnetic discs. You called it Spinbird. It didn't fly, but you swore it would." She smiled faintly. "I never got it to fly, but I kept rebuilding it. You asked me not to go when the transport ship arrived. I told you I'd be back. You were 17. You believed it." "I did, and then they wiped me." Her smile disappeared. He exhaled, hands in his pockets. "You know, I've seen a lot of strange things, plants that speak in color, gravity wells that sing opera, a vending machine that somehow dispenses both soup and anxiety, but nothing messes with my head like knowing I was part of all this and then not. You tried to protect me, and I still left because they made you forget. He looked at her. I want to remember everything, even the bad parts. Then we need to synchronize with the crystal, just once. It'll show you the neural pathway map, like an echo of the old you, imprinted in the matrix. Sounds painful. It is, but I'll be there. He gave her a long look. If I start talking in binary or quoting ancient laundry rituals, pull me out. I have protocols for scrambled humans. Of course you do. She adjusted the interface. The room darkened. The crystal pulsed once, and a strand of light extended from it to Elias, wrapping around his wrist like silk. He shuddered. It was cold and warm at once. He could hear whispers, not words, more like memories filtered through emotion. Then he wasn't standing in the room anymore. He was somewhere else. A memory construct built from dust and light. The garden, the dome, the smell of ozone and flowers genetically engineered to survive vacuum swings. He was younger, thinner, wearing the badge of the Coalition's research team, and across from him the girl, Kais, half hidden behind a flowering vine. "You're leaving," she said. "I have to," the younger Elias answered. "Why?" "Because they told." "Me too. They said you'd be okay. But I'm not," she whispered. "I'm scared." "I'll come back," he said. "I promise." Then darkness. The scene faded, replaced by a room of adults arguing, debates about ethics, contracts, asset retrieval. Kais's file on the table, labeled not with her name but with her project designation, prototype consciousness integration. Viable. Recommended extraction within the quarter cycle. Young Elias slammed his fist on the table. "She's a child, not a case study." "She's more than a child," one man said. "She's proof." "I'll leak everything," Elias snarled. "I'll burn this entire." In program down. He grabbed the file and stormed out. The projection dissolved. Elias stumbled back into reality, heart pounding. Kais caught him as he nearly fell. "I tried," he breathed. "I really did. I know." He looked at her, older now, stronger, changed, but still holding something of that frightened girl in her eyes. "I was just a kid, but I knew it was wrong. You did more than any of the adults," she said softly. They stood there for a long moment. Then the console chimed. "Unknown access attempt detected," it said in clipped Terran standard. Kais swore. "Someone else is trying to interface with the crystal," she said, racing to the panel. "Through the satellite link. They're trying to overwrite the access protocols." Elias's stomach turned. "Can they?" "If they have the original clearance keys, yes." He looked at her. "What do we do?" "We fight it." "Using what?" She opened a second interface. "Your memories, mine. We flood the system with every moment they tried to bury." Elias raised an eyebrow. "We weaponize our trauma?" With some sarcasm, "Yes. I've trained my whole life for this." "Then get ready. This is going to hurt." The lights flared, and the past began to fight back. The lights in the chamber danced wildly, flickering between spectra not normally visible to human eyes. Elias squinted as the data crystal vibrated in its suspension field, a deep, subsonic hum rattling the floor like a distant quake, or a beast stirring in sleep. Kais's fingers flew across the console too fast for him to follow, cycling through. Firewalls, encryption layers, and security fragments that sounded more like spells than code. "Okay," Elias said, gripping the side of the console for balance. "Level with me. Are we defending the crystal or exorcising it?" "Yes," Kais said. "Also, if you see any anomalous patterns shaped like spiders with faces, do not let them touch. Your mind, they're rogue memory fragments." Elias paled. "That's not a sentence I ever wanted to hear." Welcome to the trauma mainframe, Elias. We've got fun and games. The signal spike hit a moment later, sharp, pointed like a knife of static straight to the spine. The interface hissed. One screen sparked. One of the support drones exploded in a puff of smoke and indignation. The console groaned as a new program took form on the network. A foreign architecture, slick, cold, aggressive. It moved through the system like oil through water, coating everything. "It's got a signature," Kais muttered. "ECI class override. Ghost protocol Zeta 3. That's a government. Kill sequence designed for memory purges." Elias looked up sharply. "Wait, Zeta 3, isn't that the one they used on the Vonner prison mines? They used it to silence riots in a digital penitentiary where the inmates were uploaded consciousnesses." "Yes." "Perfect. That's very comforting. Do we have any anti-riot thoughts lying around?" "Only yours. Oh, we are so doomed." The foreign presence began to rewrite memory nodes in the data crystal. Faces flickered, twisted, vanished. Kais hissed through her teeth and rerouted power to the defense subsystems. Elias stepped up beside her and reached for the neural input jack. She caught his wrist. "You sure?" she asked. "I once got drunk on Martian moonshine and insulted a diplomat's pet fungus. I've lived with worse regrets. Don't get stuck in there. I've got a fail-safe. That's a muffin. It's emotional support food." He jammed the jack into his neural port, and the world blurred. He was back inside the memory matrix, except it wasn't clean anymore. It was fraying. The garden from earlier had turned to ash. The sky looped in fractal spirals that screamed like broken violins. Data spiders skittered across corrupted ground, consuming patches of memory with their clawed legs. Elias steadied himself and forced the map interface open. A tangled mass of emotions unraveled before him. Moments, fears, decisions, guilt, his, Onan Kais's. The override program moved through it all, scrubbing nuance into obedience. Memories that didn't fit its logic were flagged and deleted. "I hate tidy fascist AI," Elias muttered, building a firewall from linked emotional anchors. The moment he promised Kais he'd return, the first time he'd sabotaged a coalition data drop. The night he stood in the rain outside the orbital station, unsure why he was crying. Each memory became a wall, each guilt became a gate. The override couldn't pass without passing its complexity. The override paused, analyzed, then adapted. A new form emerged from the corrupted memory, humanoid, tall, faceless. It wore his old coalition uniform, but the eyes burned red with rewritten purpose. "Aha," Elias said. "My evil twin. Of course you are." "The anomaly," the faceless Elias said. "Deviation, insubordination, error." "Yeah, I've heard that before." "Got it embroidered on a towel." The construct moved fast, too fast. It crossed the distance between them in a blink and drove a blade of code into Elias's mental defenses. Pain flared through his thoughts like shrapnel. He fell back into a corrupted memory. A training exercise, maybe, or an escape run-through. Eleris's ravines, except everything was wrong. The faces were wrong. The commands echoed nonsense. He pushed back. "Hey," he said through clenched teeth, "you ever wonder why you don't remember your own jokes, faceless me?" The construct paused. Elias smiled. "Because you're not the funny one." Kaiser's presence dropped into the memory space like thunder. She didn't walk so much as a writhe, slamming into the override's field with a will shaped like a blade. Her eyes glowed with light from 1,000 preserved minds. She looked older, ancient, unbreakable. "Get out of him," she said. The override twisted to face her, but she was already inside its framework, rewriting code with elegance and fury. It staggered under her assault. For a moment, Elias caught a glimpse of who she had become, more than just a survivor, more than a prototype. She was something born of memory and fire, of loss and knowledge. The override crumbled beneath her. In thoughts, the memory space stabilized. Elias blinked, returning to consciousness. Smoke drifted from the console. Sparks spat from damaged circuits. The crystal pulsed slowly, weak but intact. "You okay?" Kais asked, kneeling beside him. He gave her a shaky thumbs up. "I dreamt of data spiders. Please tell me they're not real." "They are. I'm going to need a lot of therapy. I'll put it on your invoice." They sat in silence for a moment, catching their breath. The chamber still hummed with residual energy. "Who sent the override?" Elias finally asked. "I don't know," Kais said, "but it came from a shadow node on the old Earth net. Someone high up, someone who knew what this place was." He stared at the crystal. "They're not going to stop." "No, but now we know how to fight."